It is Friday, August 9th, 2019. Welcome to another episode of the Josh Scanlon Podcast. I got a great one here for you today. Wade Pfau. What more needs to be said? Wade has been a go-to guy of mine for easily a decade now. It's got to be at least a decade. For financial planning, just discussion, analysis. Wade is truly an economist, financial planning guru, in my opinion. And actually, ironically, until I interviewed Wade just a few minutes ago, I did not know that he had a PhD in economics. I knew he had a PhD, just not in economics. I also did not know that he lived in Japan for 10 years, from 2000, I think he said 2003 to 2012 or something like that. And his first article he sent for the Journal for Financial Planning was looking at the historical evidence of the 4% rule in international countries. And that has always been actually interesting to me, which I talk about a little bit in the episode, because if you're just looking at 4% rule, 5% rule, 10% rule, 1% rule in your rose-colored glasses of the U.S., that's not enough. The U.S. was a very exceptional case in the last century, for sure. Very exceptional. And that's what Nassim Nicholas Taleb talks about. I use that guy's name all the time because the guy's just a freaking wonder kind, without question. You can, but you, in my opinion, you shouldn't just use the U.S. to put a gauge of what it's going to be in the future. There's just so many things that the U.S. was exceptional at in 2000s, in the 20th century, that we may or may not be in the 21st, that you can't just use that and say, this is where I'm going to go. It's you can't. So anyway, let me give an example. I'm just reading real quick. This is from Robert Samuelson in the Washington Post. Talks about economists don't know what they're talking about, and I completely agree. That doesn't mean they're bad. That just means they have so many predictions. You don't know which one to follow. B, when they're wrong, no one holds them accountable. But they do hold Irving Fisher accountable when he says, "Oh, the markets are at a permanent high in 1929, and then they fell off a cliff, and he went bankrupt because of that, and he died penniless." They say, "Irving Fisher, ha ha ha! What did you know?" But if you predict recessions, climate change, calamities, doom and gloom, and that doesn't happen, no one ever holds you accountable. It's weird. But if you make positive predictions that don't happen, everyone holds you accountable. Anyway, so I thought it was pretty funny. He quoted right here. He goes, "Of course, the most conspicuous example of this ignorance gap, i.e. economists they never call in the market, not just the stock market, but just the economy as a whole, is the 2008 and 9 financial crisis and the Great Recession. Why did nobody notice it?" said Queen Elizabeth. And the answer is actually fairly easy. This is critically important. Economists and others, i.e. you and me, are conditioned by our own experiences, and a widespread financial panic in a rich society was not among those experiences. It hadn't happened in their lifetimes and couldn't happen. We had solved that problem through sensible government regulation and sophisticated financial management. So it seemed. In reality, that belief we had outlawed a financial panic rationalized more risk-taking behavior, which ultimately led to the financial panic. I could not agree with that more. Actually, let me read this, keep going here, because this is even more important. The larger cause of the ignorance gap is the very complexity and the obscurity of a 20 trillion economy, the United States, and a 85 trillion world economy. To say it is changing in detailed and often unanticipated ways is simply to affirm that mere mortals, including economists, have never been very good at predicting the future. And when you think of it, this is why I'm an Austrian economist. I'll never be a socialist. You can never have command and control. You can top down. The $20 trillion economy of the U.S. is led by your hundreds of decisions you're making every single day. I'm right now recording this on Anchor.fm. I could be recording on Apple, for instance. I had to make a decision. I used Twisted Wave to upload my recordings into my podcast. I could use some other software. You see how this works? I make a decision. We're making hundreds of decisions every single day for my own personal economy. And I add that with my wife's, with my kids, with the neighbors. And you see how it goes. You can never have a command control economy to ever work. It just won't work because the economy is not from the top. It's from you making your own individual decisions. Economists, a lot of times, they don't acknowledge that, so they try to act like they're all that in a bag of chips because, again, going back to the physics envy, they want to have math to show that they know what's going to happen in the future when they don't. And look, Wade's got a PhD in economics. I guarantee he would say the same. But here's, I always thought this one was always funny. The only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable, said John Kenneth Galbraith. I always thought that was kind of funny, actually. And I still like the one, I think Paul Samuelson said, economists have successfully predicted 17 of the last 4 recessions. So we have a lot of issues with economics that are leave a lot to be desired. But without question, what I love about economists and economics is they're very well read, very well observed. They have this empirical, precise, that's not right, empirical vision of the world from what they observed. You see what I'm saying? So they're not just digging their head in the sand and saying, I don't want to hear it. They're looking for evidence to make an argument. And that's why I like, because their arguments, while some are not sound, some are more sound than others, at the end of the day, they have at least the dedication to make an argument and not just go off emotions. That's why, even Paul Krugman, the guy's wrong a million times a Sunday, but he makes rational arguments. At least it seems rational when he makes them. And I think that's good. And a lot of other academics, they don't do that. But anyway, what's interesting, though, is Wade being in Japan. I think we forget how interesting Japan is relative to our own aspects of we are always worried about runaway inflation, yet Japan is 190% debt to GDP, and they don't have runaway inflation. They had negative interest rates for the longest time trying to get inflation to kick in, and they can't make it happen. And, yet they're not exactly like the U.S., but we're certainly pretty doggone close. We don't have anywhere near the debt to GDP that they have either. And so it's interesting because if you look at Wade's experience in Japan, on top of his studies of the world as a whole, on top of, kind of looking at the 4% rule here in the U.S., it does make you challenge the idea that you can just put your hat on the 4% rule and be done. You can't. Which is why I always like Wade going into the realm of reverse mortgages. And this is what we talk a lot about here today is, you got 3 buckets of money. We can use 4. We can use your stocks, your bonds, Social Security. That would be a good bucket. And then your equity in your home. And only to use 3 of the 4 when the biggest one you have is the equity in your home is crazy talk, in my opinion. And, I'm putting words in Wade's mouth, but why would you not use it? It doesn't make sense. And that doesn't mean you have to use it, but why would you not at least activate it to some regard, or at least consider activating it? If it represents the bulk of your net worth, not to use that just means you're living less than you could be. And I'm not going to do that. That doesn't mean you have to do it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to freaking buy that sucker reverse mortgage the minute I hit 62. Again, if I'm going to age in place, I plan on staying in my house. All that stuff's got to be a caveat. But that's what I liked about Wade is he was willing to take on the orthodoxy. Maybe it's because he's not trained in pure financial planning circles. He didn't come up through the investment world. He came up through academia and things like that nature. But he also sees what happened in Japan. He does studies on international economics, international returns, and financial planning. I find it. I could sit there and talk to Wade a million times a Sunday. We talk a little bit about his book. His book, Reverse Mortgages book. I forgot what it's called, but I'll put a link in the show notes. He's part of the Stanford Center for Longevity Studies, and they've done a couple different studies in there, one that's just recent. So it's just a lot of great stuff. I think you'll get a lot out of this for sure. I would highly encourage you to buy Wade's book on reverse mortgages. Absolutely. I am. Yeah, every time I think about this, the more I'm absolutely look, do what you got to do. Facts are interest rates are low. There's no reason to think they're going up anytime soon. But the benefit of reverse mortgage is when interest rates are low, your line of credit increases as interest rates go up. So if interest rates are expected to go up and you can lock that sucker in now, that just means your line of credit will increase. I think it's a good thing, man. So look into that. And of course, wherever you get these podcasts, give me a 5-star, give me some comments, ratings, share this with other people. Buy Wade's book, read his research papers, and if you got comments, put them in the show notes for sure. All right, we'll see you guys next time. I hope you enjoyed the episode. All right, my friends, I cannot tell you how excited I am to have Wade Pfau on the line with me here today at the Josh Scanlon podcast. This is just awesome. I've been reading Wade for a long time. I mean a long time. Wade, Blanchett, Michael Fink or Finke out of, I guess he's no longer at Texas Tech. Obviously, Kitsis, Thomason. I mean, there's so many just gurus of financial planning, Guyton, that you just, all these guys have been following. And so having a chance to talk to Wade and ask some of the questions that you all asked me to ask him is amazing. So Wade, welcome to the podcast, man. This is a true pleasure for me for you to be here, sir.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wade had just moved to Dallas, as a matter of fact. And is all your stuff still back in PA, or are you fully moved into your new Dallas stomping grounds now?
No, we are fully moved in now. It did take about 3 weeks where we were without stuff, but yeah, we're good now.
Yeah. What brought you down there, Wade?
Oh, just a lot of small factors, but a big one specifically with Dallas was really close to the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. There's great school districts and great communities, and I travel so much, it's now less than 15 minutes to get to the gate, and so that's really helpful.
So you moved down there
everywhere.
I mean, is your job down there, or you just said I need to be close to a good airport with good schools? Is that kind of what it was?
Yeah, that was part of it. I'm still at the American College, and so we'll stop by there on occasion, but increasingly our faculty are dispersed around the country. And yeah, with traveling so much, it's just more convenient being here. I'm looking forward to the winter weather being better than in the Northeast. And
yeah. Well, the Philly airport was nice. It's small, relatively speaking. It's kind of like Boston, but you always have to take a connection, which sucks. So Dallas is certainly a better place, and not lower property taxes, but no state income tax, Wade. Not too shabby. I'm sure that had nothing to do with your phone financial planning, right?
Yeah, that was part of it too. Pennsylvania wasn't too bad at 3%, but yeah, no state income tax, although higher homeowners insurance, which I didn't realize in advance. They get so many hailstorms.
Oh man, Dallas is nuts, man. Absolutely. So Wade just told me he's a native of Detroit, but Iowa is what he calls home. So Wade, tell us and me. I mean, I've read your stuff so long. I feel like you're a brother from another mother, but I don't know anything about your background. I mean, so tell us. You're sitting there in Iowa, raising corn for a living, and all of a sudden you're a freaking go-to guy for all things financial planning. How did that jump happen? What made you end up where you are?
Well, my original career goal was to be a U.S. government economist, and so I was finishing my PhD in economics. Started thinking it might be nice to be a professor and also to live in another country. So I spent 10 years in Japan, and then in 2013 moved back to the States to the American College, where I'm now the RICP program director for our retirement income. And that's kind of how I got to living in Philadelphia for a while. The American College is based outside of Philadelphia. It's now in King of Prussia. It moved to a new campus recently, about the same time I moved to Dallas. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
So you were in Japan for 10 years up until 2013?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from 2003 to 2013, I was an economics professor. I'd done my dissertation about President Bush had that proposal to privatize part of Social Security and create personal accounts. So I had analyzed that, and then in Japan, I kind of started looking more at the pension systems of different emerging market countries. But I realized if I want to move back to the United States, that's not really a very marketable type of skill to have of how emerging market pension funds work. So started to make that transition into personal retirement planning. And that was partly just I sent an article to the Journal of Financial Planning and had such a good experience with that, where people reading the article and so forth, which academics are not used to. They're used to just having their articles collect dust on library bookshelves. So yeah, that was convinced me to make the full transition from economics to financial planning.
What was the article, do you recall?
That one was the international perspective of the safe withdrawal rate, like just checking did the 4% rule work with other countries' data and finding that it really didn't.
It did not, right? Yeah, okay. What were you that's incredibly interesting to me. So we have the 4% rule, and I look, I'm not trying to get into that because I appreciate how the 4% rule has led us to a different place in financial planning. I find it has some challenges, as you can attest to for sure. But so you're the boilerplate 4% rule, then you start looking at it in other countries. Were you just amazed by how different it was for other countries?
Well, at that stage, I don't know if I was really amazed. It was more a matter, for a different article, I had to use a big chunk of my research budget to get this Morningstar global returns data. And so I was looking for other uses for it. And And I think as a part of studying for the CFA, I came across the 4% rule. I really didn't know a whole lot about it at the time, but somehow just made the connection that it'd be interesting. So the 4% rule worked with U.S. historical data. How did it look with other countries' historical data? Thought that'd be a worthwhile topic with the data.
What do you think about like Nassim Nicholas Taleb and other folks who say, yeah, and I'm putting words in their mouth, and we all understand the fat tail risk and all that stuff, but we're using this on just a very limited U.S. approach, and I mean, it always kind of concerns me actually, because there's always going to be somebody lucky in the markets. Is Warren Buffett good or is he lucky? We'll never know. But there's always someone who's an outlier on both sides of the bell curve, so to speak. So, to use the 4% rule based on previous data that's really limited. And I just read an article you had written. I can't remember. I don't know how long ago it was. Maybe it's recent. I can't remember. But no, it's about your take on the Monte Carlo, how it's actually better than maybe it gets credit for, and so it does have its ramifications. But just what do you think, man? I mean, it seems like we have such a limited data set, and yet so many retirees are building their entire ability to go off into their latter part of their lives on this one data set. I don't know. It's kind of, what do you think? I don't even know if I'm making sense. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's a concern, especially if you think about how the 20th century U.S. is really a remarkable period in world history, and to just extrapolate from that, I just think it makes sense to look at a more typical international experience if you're just trying to develop conservative assumptions about what might work for retirees today. And so a broader international experience, I think, makes sense. And of course, there's all these arguments about, well, is data from the 1920s relevant at all to the world today? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I think look at it more as just, well, it's kind of like the universe is a Monte Carlo simulation, and we're getting one simulated run, and we have no idea what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So the more we can draw on what it looked like in the past, the more we can kind of get an idea about what kind of outcomes we might expect.
Well, I thought your article on the Monte Carlo, and again, I think that's an advisor perspective. You and Blanchett, I think I was reading. That was pretty interesting to me because I wasn't ready to throw in the towel on Monte Carlo, but I'd read Jim Otters or Otters, whatever that guy's name is, from 2006, long time ago, on Monte Carlo. And I've always just, and then reading, Nassim and obviously I read, Benoit Mandelbrot and stuff, and just, you're kind of like, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, what else can you use? I mean, you can use historical returns and Monte Carlo, and that's pretty much the best you can do. Because we just don't know, like you said. How did you end up? So reverse mortgages. Like I told you before here is, here I am, I get a thing on my FPA email that says, I could have sworn, I'm positive as you, 2012 or 13, that Wade Pfau is doing a webinar on reverse mortgages. Look, I'm 49 years old, Wade, I got 4 kids. Don't quote me if this isn't completely accurate, but my memory serves is that's what happened. I said, what the hell? Why is Wade talking about reverse mortgages? Those things are bad. I mean, just listen to Dave Ramsey. He says they're scams. And so how did you end up, and I'm not saying you're waving the banner on these, but you took a much more diligent approach to look at reverse mortgage than anyone else, which, again, I'm not trying to say it convinced me, but it really has led me to see the value in these, which is 180 degrees from where I was. How did you get to that perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, so if you're talking about that far back, I'm thinking it might not have been me necessarily, but maybe Harold Avinsky.
Man,
that's kind of the...
Yep, that guy. Yep.
Right. Yeah, what got him started that early was after the financial crisis, he had the HELOCs for all of his clients, and they all got frozen and canceled at the time he wanted them to be able to use them.
Right.
So he started looking for alternatives, and that's what led him to start to look at the reverse mortgage initially, because it's a growing line of credit that cannot be canceled or frozen. It's contractually protected. And they were the group that then brought me in to start looking at them as well. That was, I think, in 2014. John Salter, one of Harold's colleagues at Texas Tech University, invited me to a funding longevity task force meeting and sent me a big stack of articles about reverse mortgages. And just as I read those on the flight to the event, that was really my introduction to reverse mortgages, and became really fascinated because I like writing programs that simulate retirement outcomes. And reverse mortgages have a lot of interesting features that make it an interesting challenge to program them. And that's what got me started. But yeah, I started replicating the research that Harold Avinsky and John Salter had done, and also Barry Sachs and some others, and finding the same sort of story. Some of the rules change over time and things, but updating it and running it through my version with my capital market expectations, and finding the same general conclusions that all those earlier folks found, which is the conventional wisdom idea that you just don't touch the home until everything goes wrong and you have no other option and it's your last resort, and then you consider a reverse mortgage. If you're thinking about ways to incorporate home equity into the financial planning process, that ends up really being the worst way you can go about doing it. Looking at a reverse mortgage earlier than you might ultimately need it because it helps to start that process to build the line of credit, can really lay foundations for better outcomes than using it as that last resort option.
And I mean, it's nuts too, because I'm reading your stuff on from Stanford, and we'll talk about it here in just a second. The middle and lower middle class people, and a lot of these guys have equity, a decent amount of equity, if not 100% equity in their homes. And it's weird, because why would we not at least look to use some of that equity, especially if they're going to age in place, and especially if we have 1.75 on the 10-year? It's just I don't understand. I get his ignorance, but it just seems inherently obvious to me that you have this $150,000 or $200,000 home. We'll just say it's paid off. Why would that not be considered as part of the equation for retirement planning? I don't. It's just odd to me. And anyway, so your research there really helped me change my opinion. And I tell you, man, that's a big deal, because most of my subscribers on my channel, they're not the multimillionaire, what the financial advisory industry is all shooting for. They're just regular people, you know what I'm saying? And with just regular houses and regular income streams, and but they're scared crapless about retirement. And I don't think we've done ourselves a service in the industry from allowing that fear to permeate, if you know what I mean.
Right. I mean, the average person can have about, average retiree aged person, about 2/3 of their net worth might be in their home equity, not counting like Social Security present value, but just financial portfolio plus home equity can be about 2/3 home equity. And so to not really involve that in the planning process, you're right, it doesn't make sense. And if you can strategically use home equity, it can really create a more efficient plan so that you're able to get either more spending power or preserve more at the end. That last resort option is not necessarily the right way to be thinking about that.
Well, why do you think, and I'm just asking you to put words in other people's mouths, but it's like, I tell you, it's like a hostility towards these products. And everyone knows they're expensive on the front end. No one denies that, but it's just weird, man. It's like this hostility like people have towards annuities, and these are just all inanimate objects. They're neither good nor bad. They literally have no moral value at all. But any reason why I think there's so much negativity around reverse? I mean, they don't put people out. That's what I don't understand. Like, don't pay your property taxes, you're going to be put out. Reverse mortgage or home free and clear. I just don't get it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, so with negative coverage, there are people that have had bad experiences, but the government's always tightening the rules around it. So they've added financial assessments and different things that those kind of hard luck, the last resort cases, right? You've run out of assets, you use the reverse mortgage. It allows you to further extend your ability to live in the home, but ultimately you're still running out of assets. And then because you're not paying property taxes, you might be foreclosed. And then that becomes a negative story that the reverse mortgage caused the person to be kicked out of their house. But if they didn't use the reverse mortgage, their kind of lifetime outcome might not have been any better, because a few years earlier they would have had a house and they could sell it and now manage that for a few more years. It's not, the media just kind of blames the reverse mortgage when the reverse mortgage might still have given them a better outcome than what they would have had without it. And it's not really digging into that aspect. It's just somehow the reverse mortgage is to blame that they've run out of assets.
in your retirement researcher, your book, not retirement research on your website, but in your book on reverse mortgages, which I've linked to a million times a Sunday, and I've referred to it a million times a Sunday too. You talk about when you're going through like the closing costs, feel free to negotiate, the origination fees and all that stuff as well. Any thoughts on just when people are, looking at doing a reverse mortgage, anything you can prepare them? Because I've never done one. I've talked to a guy, and he was a good guy. I liked him. I could see him maybe overselling it a little bit. I could see that happening. And, but, I would trust him. But at the end of the day, anything you can tell, I don't say warn people. It's not like you're going into the Army or something like that, or a recruiter's office. But you had mentioned that, like, just, be willing to negotiate. Anything else that jumps out at you, Wade, in terms of when you're going to originate or at least discuss a reverse mortgage for your own retirement planning? Not you specifically, but, the average Joe who's listening to this right now.
Well, yeah, at least talk to a couple of different lenders, and there is some negotiation power there with the upfront costs and also with the interest rate that goes onto the loan balance, and also the line of credit. That's the growing line of credit is because it grows at the same rate that any loan balance would grow. But you can have some negotiation around that, just like with any other kind of mortgage where there's some flexibility with interest rates versus upfront costs. And then most reverse mortgages are still this home equity conversion mortgage, which is it's not a government program, but it's administered through the Housing and Urban Development, and there's rules and regulations around everything. So the loans then become fairly standardized. There's not much difference other than how, like the servicing company, that's more complaints about reverse mortgages also come in because of issues dealing with the servicer. But beyond that, it's a fairly standardized product once you agree on the terms. And there are also now jumbo reverse mortgages because the home equity conversion mortgage program has limits on the value of the home that can be applied to the reverse mortgage. So if you're getting into jumbo reverse mortgages, there's less standardization. It's no longer a government administered program. And there's also no line of credit with the jumbo. Although that's changing now. I think a couple of companies are introducing a line of credit with jumbo. So I might have just misspoke, but that's a evolving process. After there was a rule change in 2017 that increased the upfront costs primarily through mortgage insurance premiums. And then those home equity conversion mortgages dropped by about 30% after that. And I think that was kind of a lot of reverse mortgage lenders suddenly, your whole business is predicated upon the idea that the government can change the rules whenever they want and cut your revenues by 30%. And so I think that's what prompted them more to look to just create programs that don't have the government guarantee and are not part of the government.
I got you. So the political wind changing won't shift the business model necessarily.
Right. And that rule change that came, it caught everyone off guard. And it happened in late August 2017 and went into effect in October of 2017 and had huge impacts for something that no one really saw coming other than in the first edition of my book, I said something like this might happen someday, but never knew when. And then I had to do a second edition unexpectedly because the rule change was so significant that I had to rerun everything I'd done. The first edition was out of date with the new rules.
Jeez. So if they bought the first edition, they that was literally yesterday's news.
Well, if they had opened their reverse mortgage before the October 2017 date, the first edition's still the right one for them. But yeah, anyone who's doing it after that date.
What was the issue? Is that they were because are these you said what HUD? Are they the folks who oversee this? But who are the lender? Like, where's the money coming from to pay off the first and all? Where's it? Who gives the money out?
Well, so the lenders for reverse mortgages tend to be smaller. All the big banks dropped out of it after the financial crisis, and they're mainly securitizing the loans. So that's how they're able to be a small lender and still not need the full capital of everything they're lending out. They're selling them on as securitized assets.
So you got the lender securitizing these assets. selling them through brokers. And, Josh Scanlon in Charlotte, my wife, we're 62 years old. We'd go to a broker, and he can look at the various the lending entities and things of that nature, what they're charging, what their rates are, and all that, just like a regular mortgage.
Well, that would be like if you're buying a security as an investment. If you actually want to get a reverse mortgage,
right,
there is no centralized kind of like a bank rate or anything. You really just have to talk to each individual company. That you
gotcha.
can't. There is, there's nothing centralized about this company's offering these rates and so forth.
Okay,
that would be nice if there could be some.
I gotcha. So you really want to find out who is actually lending the money and go into those various entities. Say, here's small bank A, small bank B, small bank C, and just go each and every one of them to see what their terms are, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
How does escrow work? If you're paying off your first, well, no, I don't even know. I mean, do they escrow it, or do you gotta still? I mean, do you still gotta?
Yeah, once the reverse mortgage is in place, you can't have any other debt on the home. So you can refinance your traditional mortgage, and that's actually the most common use. So you would refinance it through the reverse mortgage and shift your remaining mortgage balance into the loan balance on the reverse mortgage.
And they take care of property taxes and homeowners insurance, just like a regular first mortgage. That's what they do.
It can be set up that way, especially as part of these reforms were in 2015, where there's this financial assessment. And if it's determined that you may be able to fund your property taxes over your lifetime, there'll be a life expectancy set-aside adjustment.
Okay.
Where part of your line of credit will be kind of off limits to you and will be used to pay your property taxes.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. Because one of the concerns obviously is they're going to put you out. They're going to put you out. And I said, well, you're getting. I mean, like we said before, you're getting put out without paying your property taxes. I'm sure the reverse mortgage lenders have a significant wanting to make sure those property taxes are paid for sure. So they have some kind of system set up to make sure that happens, because you're not borrowing 100% loan to value. I mean, what you're doing, like 42%, I think the retirement researcher calculator I ran just the other day was at 62 years old, like 42% loan to value or something like that, right, Wade? I mean, so you're not even getting above hardly 50% until you get pretty old.
Yeah, at like age 62 and with where interest rates generally are, you'd be looking at around 40, 45% in that ballpark. That was brought down in that 2017 rule change too. It would have been closer to 50% before that.
Yeah, but there's still tons of equity. That's I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but I'm just sitting there thinking there's still tons of equity in the home. I just don't understand like this whole idea like you'll be put out when you're 71 years old. I mean, how? Is it? One of the things I have a question on is it better to do it when the interest rates are low or wait till they go up? And I don't know when this ever going up will ever occur, but any thoughts on that, Wade? To do a line of credit, I'm saying a line of credit. Let's just say you have 100% equity and you want to take a line of credit for emergency purposes, market crash or something like that. Is it better to do it now while rates are low or wait until rates go up if that were ever to happen?
Yeah, especially for a line of credit. The reverse mortgage is actually the one retirement strategy I'm aware of that benefits you from low interest rates, because it's the initial borrowing amount. It's just a present value calculation. So a lower interest rate means you can borrow more initially, and then your line of credit starts to grow. Well, with a lower interest rate, it will grow at a lower pace. But it's a variable interest rate. And so if there is a possibility that interest rates increase in the future, that you get to borrow more borrowing capacity initially, and then potentially more opportunity for that to grow faster.
Interesting.
In the future.